Professor Rezavi brought our attention to Professor Jha's contribution. Am I audible?
Yeah. If you will.
Professor Rezavi drew our attention to Professor Jha's contribution as party to the report of the historians to the nation vis-a-vis the Babari Masjid. I must add to that when Professor Jha was the secretary of the Indian History Congress, and when there was tremendous euphoria over serialization of Ramayana over television, and threats were being made for the destruction of the Babari Masjid, it was under his leadership that in the 1986 session of the Indian History Congress at Srinagar, a resolution was passed against the communal and obscurantist forces in a very, very strongly worded resolution. That was way back in 1986. I may also add that since the 1986, Professor Jha's agenda of writing history underwent a transformation, and he really took up all the issues that have been bothering us today. In fact, amongst his several acts of iconoclasm, one would like to mention his book on Holy Cow, contesting symbols, against the grain, and so on and so forth. If in his earlier writings, pre-1980 writings, if he demystified the golden age of early Indian history, I have no hesitation in saying that since 1980s, and more particularly in the last 2 decades of his life, he wrote several monographs that tried to debunk Hindu religious fundamentalism mythomania. That was his substantive contribution to the writing of secular history. Well, Professor Rezavi drew our attention to the glamorous historian who made a distinction between academic historians and popular history. I would like to add a couple of words to that. The book that he referred to begins with the age of the Buddha, not with the glorious Vedic age, mercifully. But it stops at a point where a lot has been said about these three scholars. I don't have to say much beyond that, but I'll just try to fill a few gaps. And I'll begin by two quotes. One is the statement that our Honorable Education Minister made in February 2023 in the Lok Sabha, and I'll read out that. I quote, ICHR has not launched, this is in response to a question that was asked to him. ICHR has not launched any project to rewrite Indian history. She drew our attention to Amit Shah saying, who can stop us from rewriting history? This education minister said, ICHR has not launched any project to rewrite Indian history. The government has no intention to rewrite history. But if you ask me if the ICHR has taken any project on history, with due respect, I would like to inform this House that yes, it has taken, and that we are expanding history and filling gaps by incorporating major historical events, personalities, and incidents which are not part of history books. I don't know why the minister was trying to be defensive about that kind of an answer. There is no harm in rewriting history. History is being written all the time. But if you complement this particular statement with what Mohan Bhagwat said a few days before that, and I'll quote that, the story will get linked up. Mohan Bhagwat, in an interview to organizer and Panchanya, said, and I quote, Hindu society has been at war for 1000 years. It is but natural for those at war to be aggressive. The war is against an enemy within. It is a war to defend Hindu society, Hindu dharma and Hindu culture. The identity of enemy within for the RSS has never been in any doubt. And Bhagavad had indeed underlined, and I quote, Islam has nothing to fear, but Muslims have to give up their boisterous rhetoric of supremacy. Link up with the education minister's statement and you get the fuller picture. And the fuller picture gets unfolded in an exhibition which ICHR mounted in January 2023 under the title Glory of Medieval India, Manifestation of the Unexplored Indian Dynasties from 8th to the 18th Centuries. I repeat, Glories of Medieval India, Manifestation of the Unexplored Indian Dynasties from 8th to the 18th Century. The danger that Professor Rezavi was mentioning came out openly in this exhibition. Almost 50 dynasties were impaneled in this exhibition. Without using the word Hindu, it was more than obvious that all these 50 dynasties were Hindu dynasties. There was no mention of any dynasty of the Sultanate period, and of course Mughals were completely obliterated. So,
This was in Rabindra Bhavan?
this was in Rabindra Bhavan, that's right. But the exhibition failed to answer the contradiction. If these 50 dynasties were having a glorious period, why make Muslims the villain? And why talk about 1000 years war and 1000 years slavery? That question remained unanswered. I have a feeling that the whole agenda of the present establishment and all the establishment that proceeded in other guises. We have had the Janata government in 1977, and Sucheta drew a graphic picture of the kind of problems that came up with the textbooks of those times between 1977 and 79. Then again in the times of Vajpayee, the Shining India phase, and how the textbooks were handled by Murli Manohar Joshi, who called many of us as academic terrorists. The textbooks of those times, textbooks of today, if there are any, because they have very few competent people to write good textbooks. That's more than obvious to all of us who are engaged in writing of textbooks. The central agenda of these forces has always been the making of the Hindu Rashtra. Let there be no mistake. Everything is geared towards that. And the 5 bugbears that they have, I call them 5 M's. Mill, Macaulay, Max Muller, Marx, and Muslims. Either they derive inspiration from some, or they denigrate a few of them. That has been the agenda of all the ventures of history writing that they have been undertaking right from 1977 onward, whenever they have been in power. You might have marked that whenever such forces have come to power, they have ensured that the Ministry of Education, HRD, Ministry of Culture, Ministry of Broadcasting, Information and Broadcasting would always be manned by RSS people. They will never let any other member of their government take charge of these ministries. So their agenda is very clear, their goal is very clear, and they have always been working for that. How they have tried to Hinduize everything, how they have tried to militarize Hindus, that has been very obvious to all of us present here. I'm reminded of, I would just end by with a quote from Eric Hobsbawm, E.P. Thompson. He once remarked, deformed culture was more destructive than atom bombs. Lady talked about atom bombs recently. Deformed culture was more destructive than atom bombs, and a deformed mind was the ultimate doomsday weapon. Culture is deformed when reason, rationality, willfully divorces itself from moral sensibility, and awful realization clobbers human imagination to death. Consequently, people learn to first kill the other in abstraction long before the first stone is hurled. I'm afraid the kind of textbooks that have been in the discussion today and the kind of series of books that Sanskriti Gyan and Gaurav Gathas have been written about and circulated in various schools all over India, they are products of such a deformed culture. And I think there is need for not only detoxification, but there is perhaps also a need for disarmament. Thank you very much. And I thank the organizers for organizing this particular meeting in memory of Professor Shah. And I hope you will agree with me that it has been a fruitful offering to his memory. Thank you all very much.